In a sandpit, I once buried a child. I'm Mike, a recent college graduate returning my hometown after 15 years away. Not much has changed in this small town, except for one thing. I revisited the old park from my childhood. The sandy corner lay desolate until I noticed fresh, small footprints in the sand. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and enjoyed the pleasant countryside air. I really loved this town. Suddenly, a child's whisper echoed,
Go down and play. Why didn't you?
Who is it?
I shivered and replied.
Forgot me already? You murderer!
I panicked, turned around, and saw in the middle of the low sandbank there was a 7-year-old boy standing, his hair matted with sand, his face pale, a devilish smile. And then I remembered, a boy I used to play with here. His face was blurry, but his laugh, voice, and our last meeting felt vividly recent. He fell into a deep sand pit. The sand collapsed, and I panicked, so I ran. I told no one. He was still alive, calling my name, but I left him there.
Help me! Mike, where are you going?
But I didn't turn around, and now, he's still here, waiting for me. I knelt in the sand as the wind swirled, ears ringing. For the first time in years, I broke down and begged.
I'm sorry. It was my fault. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to kill you. It was because I was too afraid of being punished by the adults.
The boy stepped into the sand, silently watching me, then vanished into the earth as if he'd never been there. I stayed until dark. The sand lay undisturbed, but I knew he was still there. Not for revenge, just waiting for me to face my guilt. Suddenly, someone shined a flashlight on me.
Who's here at this hour? Mike?
I turned around and saw a young man about my age looking at me in surprise. I wondered,
John? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
I kept apologizing. The shame and regret seemed to be tearing me apart. John smiled gently.
Someone saved me after you ran, Mike. I'm not angry. We were just kids. Your guilt means you still care. And at least you've finally spoken.
I cried on John's shoulder, realizing the child I saw was my own honesty, a reminder to face my guilt and mend our friendship. A few days later, I left the town. Before leaving, I stopped by that old park one more time, glad that I came back here.
Every night at 2 a.m., I heard my mother's lullaby coming from downstairs. But the problem was, my mother had just passed away last month. My name is June, 27 years old, a freelance graphic designer. After my mother died from a sudden stroke, I decided to return to the old house in Vermont, where I was born and raised. I hoped to find the familiar peace there to help soothe the pain of losing my mother. I began to relive old habits, sitting in the exact chair my mother used to sit in, eating from the porcelain bowl she used. This made me feel as if my mother was still by my side like before. On the first night, I couldn't sleep because the emptiness in my chest kept stabbing sharply. I told myself I needed time to get used to life without my mother anymore. Then, when the clock struck exactly 2 a.m., a melody suddenly sounded from downstairs. At first, I thought it was a hallucination because there was no one else in the house but me. But when I listened more carefully, I was shocked to realize it was the lullaby my mother used to sing to me every night.
Sleep well, my dear. I am always here.
I ran downstairs to check but found nothing, and the singing had stopped at some point. Maybe I missed my mother so much that I created that sound in my head. In the following nights, the lullaby still played at exactly 2 a.m. But the melody was no longer gentle. The sounds began to distort and go off beat. I searched every drawer and corner of the room, trying to find where the sound came from. When I knelt beside the bed, I discovered an old cassette player, rusted and worn. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I pressed play.
Don't go to the basement. Don't go to the basement.
I couldn't endure it any longer. An unnamed urge forced me to go down. I jumped up, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out of the room. Downstairs, I stood frozen in front of the basement door that had somehow been left ajar. I had never gone in there. My mother had strictly forbidden me since I was a child, afraid I might fall. I reached out and pushed the door. The hinge screeched a long, chilling sound. When the flashlight stopped on a familiar object, my old cradle. Inside the cradle was an old leather notebook, its cover worn and torn. It was my mother's diary. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. The writing was broken, as if from someone losing their mind. On the last page, I saw a scribbled line, ink blurred as if smeared by tears. I took her life. However, why is she still present? I immediately put my hand on my chest. No warmth, no heartbeat. It turned out I was dead, but my soul was still trapped in this house. Every night I lived again, repeating familiar actions. And tonight, here I was again.
People often dreamed about magic lamps and 3 wishes. But what if those wishes turned into curses? I was Kevin, an office worker living alone in a small house in the suburbs. That day, on my way home from work, I passed by a roadside dump and was drawn to something glittering in a pile of old junk. It was a porcelain teapot with chipped glaze and faded patterns. But something about it felt like it came from a fairy tale. A faint light seemed to flicker from it, strangely pulling me in. I picked it up, brushed off the dust, and decided to take it home as a decoration for my bedroom. That night, I dreamed of a soft whisper in my ear.
Rub me. 3 wishes will come true.
I jolted awake. The room was still pitch dark. The teapot sat quietly on the shelf. I turned on the light and stared at it, a curious feeling welling up inside me. I picked up the teapot, thinking of the old tales I had read, and rubbed it. Nothing happened. I laughed at myself, feeling silly, and went back to sleep. The next morning, just as I stepped out the gate, the neighbor's dog rushed out, barking furiously.
Why don't you just drop dead?
When I came home that evening, I froze. The dog was lying stiff and lifeless right in front of the house across the street. A strange, indescribable feeling crept over me. Later that night, after a shower, I turned on the TV and began watching the news. They were reporting a terrorist group holding 20 hostages in a shopping mall.
Why not just kill them already? Why bother taking hostages?
And minutes later, the next news update came in. All 20 hostages have been killed for unknown reasons. I shivered, frozen in front of the TV. Could this really be a coincidence? I tried to recall everything and suddenly remembered the teapot and the strange dream from the night before. At that moment, I panicked as I remembered the phone call with my mother at noon. In a fit of anger, I had shouted, "Did you live just to make my life miserable?" I grabbed my phone and called her over and over, but no one answered. In despair, I ran to find the teapot, determined to destroy it. I tore the room apart, but it was gone. The teapot had vanished without a trace. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a message from my aunt. "Your mom is gone." On her stomach was carved, "Third wish."
Have you ever done something so terrible that you created false memories to hide the truth? I am Luna, living with my husband in a suburban neighborhood. That afternoon, while watering the flowers, I noticed signs that the soil in the garden had been disturbed, as though someone had tried to bury something beneath it. I immediately grabbed a shovel and dug up the soil, but found nothing.
What are you doing?
At that moment, the new neighbor, who had just moved in, walked by and struck up a conversation with me. I was just planning to plant some flowers. Is there something you need?
I've just moved here and don't know anyone. I saw you in the garden and thought I'd come over and chat for a bit.
After he said that, he approached and touched my hand, which made me flinch and step back in fear. Just then, my husband returned home. I quickly said goodbye to the neighbor and went inside with my husband. That evening, when I told my husband, he seemed irritated and said I was being overly suspicious. But I couldn't sleep, as an uneasy feeling rose in my chest. I had barely fallen asleep when I suddenly woke up gasping for air. My husband's face was right next to mine, his hands tightly around my neck, his eyes filled with hatred.
Give me back my life.
I struggled, feeling suffocated, nearly choking from the pressure. When I snapped awake in panic, my husband was no longer beside me. I looked at the clock. It was 9 a.m. He must have gone to work already. I decided to go out into the garden to get some fresh air and shake off the terrifying feeling. As soon as I opened the door, I saw the neighbor and his wife standing outside.
Hello. We're planning to renovate our house. We wanted to come over and get some ideas on how you decorate your home. Would that be all right?
So, he had a family. My husband was right. I had just overthought everything. Of course, come on in. But once inside, I had the unsettling feeling that they were looking for something. It made me feel confused and uncomfortable. When we entered the kitchen, the neighbor opened the refrigerator and his expression changed instantly. He turned to his wife and screamed that there was a body in the fridge. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my head, and countless memories flooded back. A few days earlier, I had discovered my husband's affair, and during an argument, I had unintentionally killed him. To avoid being caught, I hid the body in the fridge and dug up the garden to bury it. But overwhelmed with grief, I had completely forgotten what I had done. I began to have hallucinations, believing my husband was still by my side.